It's Summit Dodge, Tommy Saki on 95.7 The Wolf, and on the line with me is Bruce Hallihan from the Fredericton Daily Gleaner. And Bruce, first and foremost, thanks very much for doing this today. Hey, you know what? We always love reading your hockey preview, and you've done this. How many years have you been doing this preview?
This is number 19, believe it or not.
Oh,
it's
wow.
something that started and took off, I guess, from there, and I've been doing it ever since.
All right. Well, tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to focus in on the New Brunswick and the PEI school to start off. And of course, we'll start in Fredericton, where we have the defending CIS champion, UNB Varsity Reds. And your thoughts on this squad heading into the 2009-2010 season?
Well, UNB looks as good as they did last year, and if not better. They've had 8-1 preseason, and they're playing some heavy competition, going down to the States and beating NCAA teams. And the only game they lost, in fact, was to the Portland Pirates, AHL team, and they outshot the Pirates 36-22. So a pretty formidable lineup again for UNB, and they're sort of the consensus pick around the conference to win it again.
When you take a look at the additions and subtractions, they very much look like another strong year.
Well, they lost Dustin Friesen and David Bowman are the main guys in the point, along with Justin DaCosta, and up front Kevin Henderson and Jimmy Cudahy, Robert Pierce, who scored the national winner 3 years back. But they've replaced them with some big name players, so Ben Shoutron and Josh Kidd on defense, and then Dane Todd, who missed almost all of last season, is back and supposedly 100%. Chris Culligan is the all-time leading scorer in Cape Breton. Taylor Position, and so on and so forth, and they just seem to reload rather than rebuild at UNB. And so far, they've been showing that depth off with four lines going strong all the time.
And, of course, UNB is starting tonight, raising their banner against a squad that last year proved that they had a little bit of grit in them, and that's the UPEI Panthers and under Dylan Taylor. What do you see when you think of the UPEI squad?
Well, UPI lost one of the best players in the league, Justin Donati. He scored 48 points, 24 in the power play, but he's gone with his brother Tyler Donati. They went over to Europe initially and ended up back in the ECHL, semi-pro league. But other than that, they were pretty much the same squad as they were last year with some improvements. They've had Dylan Quayle, who's a top-notch defenseman. You'll hear his name a lot this season. And Jared Gomes and Brandon Biggers are both... Gomes is a 31 goal scorer in Mississauga, OHL, and Bigger 62 points. And then the guy to watch is Taylor Raska, who played 3 seasons as a minor pro. He's eligible November 1st. So I think UPI they've increased their point total the last 4 years, and they should be solid again this year, especially when they get some players back from injury who've been out most of the preseason.
When we look at the squad from UPEI, they've had some tough years, but they look like they're kind of turning a corner. Well,
Dylan Taylor has instilled that people want to go there now. There was about 4 or 5 year period where nobody really went to UPEI, but now some players have gone there and they like it and they pass the word on, and that's what it takes to be successful in this league. You've got to get the good recruits in and brag up the program, I guess, and that's what's happening with the Panthers, and they seem to have restored some pride. They were a powerhouse back in the early 90s, I would say, and now they're starting to come back into the playoff mix and give teams a battle every night.
When we go down the road a little bit, and that's to Moncton, where Bob Mongrain no longer behind the bench with the University of Moncton Aigle Blue, Serge Bourgeois in his first year with the squad. What are you expecting from the team, the UDM?
I think Moncton's going to slip a little bit this year. They have a lot of players back, but they didn't get any really big recruits in besides Matthew Balduc, who's a top-notch defenseman. The biggest recruit there is not a recruit per se, but Matthew Bertournier, who's back for a 5th year, and then Carol McLean, another stay-at-home defenseman, who will help them as well. But they lost some decent players. Nicholas Laplante, primarily, who's a top-notch face-off guy, Billy Bizot, Christian Brito, and so on. But they didn't really recruit a whole lot. Like Jean-Philippe Chabot was going to be their top recruit. He went to the ECHL as well, so they lost him late. And some adjustments to Serge Bourgeois as well. He's implementing new systems there, but we'll see how it pans out. They're still a solid team because they have good defense and good team speed. And Eric Lafrance is Kevin Lachance rather is a 5th-year goalie, so they're still a solid team in Moncton, but just maybe haven't recruited quite as well as Acadia and St. FX.
When you take a look at when you lose a Bob Mongrain, who was the head coach, and Serge coming in, it does affect a squad as they're trying to recruit for the next year.
Well, it affects things, and And Bob, I'm not sure how popular he was in Moncton among the players, so we'll see how that pans out in the long run. But for Serge to come in, it's tough because the recruiting there's always a transition there. And one thing about Serge is he's a former All-Canadian or an All-Star player himself in the league on defense, and in the '90s, much like Brad Peddle was at St. Nevek's coach, and he'll work his hardest to make that team. There's a lot of passion and pride in Moncton, and they're a tough team to beat in their own building.
And finally, for tonight, we'll go with the team that's on the ice right now, and that's the St. Thomas Tommies under the leadership again of head coach Mike Eagles. Big surprise with a late addition to the squad. Yeah,
Kenton Dooley is a nice addition. He's a name who wasn't really bandied about too much, but he comes with a good pedigree and point a game guy in the Western Hockey League, and he'll be thrown right into the mix. So he'll be in the lineup for sure, as far as on a regular basis, the top 6 forwards, I would think. And of course, it didn't stop there. Charles Levine is one of the top, if not the top goalie, come out of the CIS, come out of the CHL this year. I mean, Canadian Junior, and the Tommies got him. And Matt Eagles, who's a guy, Moncton Wildcats. He never stopped working in all his time there, sort of thing. So there's a good recruiting off season for Mike Eagles for sure. But he needed one because the team struggled so much out of the gate last year and had a decent finish to gain a little respectability. But it had to continue because it's a tough conference.
When I talk to Mike, it's a similar comment I see that he gave you going into the preview is the fact that not a lot of the teams slip, so there's a lot of hard slugging that this squad is going to have to do to make sure they get in there to try to make that playoff mix.
Well, that's it. Like Mike said, we're better, but doesn't necessarily mean we've leapfrogged over anybody, and that's the key right there because they're still trying to catch UPI, who beat them 8-1 in the preseason, and Moncton, who's been a top 4 team for the last 5 years, and of course St. Nevek's, Acadia, St. Mary's, and UMB. All those teams are strong, and Dalhousie Tigers have added 11 new faces, so they want to be there too. I think what you'll see is much like 5 years ago when there was 14 points from 1 to 8. I think this year it might be UMB ahead a fair amount, but then another 2 to 8 will be clustered more, and it'll be a fight right down to the finish.
And we have Bruce Hallihan, who is with the Fredericton Daily Gleaner, joining us to do this AUS hockey preview, and we will do part 2 of the preview, and we'll focus in on the Nova Scotia schools. You're listening to Tommy's Hockey, Summit Dodge Tommy's Hockey, and 95.7 The Wolf.